So I think one of the unique challenges for men is that we're facing the same difficulty when we go through divorce, but we're not really allowed to be authentic about it. And if we are, then people turn us down a lot and they invalidate our experience.
Welcome to the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast, where we explore the many facets of complex divorce and invite you into a journey of healing and personal transformation that will radically change your divorce experience and set you up to be effective and feel empowered. I'm Karen McMahon, your host and founder of Journey Beyond Divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome back. We have a great conversation today on divorce, masculinity, and the male identity crisis. It's a raw conversation with Josh Tomeoni.
Very good. Most people get it wrong. You got it. You nailed it.
I'm half Italian, although my McMahon name doesn't show that.
I'm half Italian, but my face doesn't show that. So yeah. I get it.
I think both of us, right? I have an Irish look. So folks, when a man goes through divorce, it's not just the relationship ending. Often there is a much deeper identity that is shattered. And so today we're going to dive into what really happens to men during and after divorce, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And my guest, Josh, is a men's coach, a financial expert, and host of the Derelict Podcast, which I'll talk about a little bit later. He himself walked through the fire of both personal and professional loss, and now he helps other men rise from the ashes with clarity, courage, and purpose. You can read all about our conversation in the show notes, and all of the links for Josh are in there as well. But we're going to jump right in. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks so much for having me, Karen. Appreciate it.
I'm very excited about today's conversation. Before we dive in, I like to ask each guest a question to share a little bit of your non-professional life with our listeners before we dive in. And so for you, my question is, what is an adventure or challenge you've taken on recently that totally pushes you out of your comfort zone?
Great question. We actually started talking about this right before you hit record because we're talking a little bit about business and what's happened and that sort of thing. I should probably start with, I'm a very adventurous guy. I love adventuring and trying new things. And I travel somewhere multiple times a year. And I just really enjoy new cultures and meeting new people and that sort of thing. And that doesn't necessarily bring me out of my comfort zone. In other words, just being in a room where I don't know anybody and I need to make a good impression and talk to them and all that sort of stuff, that just kind of comes easy to me. I'm pretty outgoing. The thing that's actually adventurous for me, which might seem odd, but maybe it's showing my age, is trying to do that online. So something that has really been new for me, Karen, the last year is when I launched my podcast, which was a little over a year ago, I decided to do a lot of things online and basically had no social media presence before then. I was on Facebook when you had to be in college and have a college email address to be on Facebook. I was a very early adopter of Facebook. And then when my son was born, who's now 12, I deleted all of my social media. So then starting up a year ago in my 40s, trying to figure out things like TikTok, which didn't exist. Just for all the young people listening right now, yes, I'm sounding very old, I get it. Like Instagram, when I used it before, didn't have video. Think about that for a second. So it was a very different world. I would call it pretty adventurous, trying to figure out how to make clips and interact with people and just figure out the whole social media thing has been pretty insane. And I sound much older than I am. I'm really good with technology. I use AI every single day. It's not like I don't, but I just very much feel like an old man a lot of the times when I'm online. I'm like, hey, kid, 15-year-old kid, come show me how to do this.
Yeah, no, I feel you, and I'm sure I'm older than you. And I think the other thing about doing this stuff online, and I'm also a bit of an extrovert, very comfortable in a room, is you're talking to a lot of people, but you feel like you're sitting there talking to yourself.
For sure.
That's like a cultural shift that when you're not used to it, feels a little bit odd.
It does. If I looked at my life a decade ago, as an example, this is obviously pre-COVID and everything else, pretty much most of my interactions during the day were in person.
Yeah.
And then a couple years before COVID, I actually took all of my meetings for my financial planning business online. And the main reason why was just because we had clients all over the country. So it was just an easier thing to happen to be extremely good timing once COVID hit because everybody was already used to meeting me online and everybody else in my industry was scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. But the only reason I bring that up is because it's just progressively gotten more online. More and more and more and more of my interactions in my daily life is staring into a computer screen and having a conversation with somebody, maybe via camera, maybe with no one seeing. And for an extroverted, outgoing guy alone in my house most of the time, especially now being divorced and only having my kids around half the time,
Yeah.
it's a very different world than I thought I would live when I was 30. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, 100%. So now that we know a little bit more about you, I would love to dive into this conversation about men and divorce. My big thing is the vast majority of divorce coaches are women, and the vast majority of the women divorce coaches coach women, and yet a good 50% of the divorces involve men, and we need to do something about that. So whenever I hear of other individuals who are passionate and focused on supporting our men, I want to bring that conversation to my listeners. And in JBD, I would say we have a good 35% men as our audience and listeners. And so their situation is unique. There's the pain of divorce, obviously, for everybody, but there's some unique things about being a man entering divorce. And I believe the statistic these days are that the vast majority of divorces are begun by the wives. And so I'm going to just let us start with a broad stroke and get your general thoughts on the impact of divorce on men, and then we'll dive into the nuances.
Sure. Just starting with the fact that I am divorced. I went through a divorce myself. It was a highly contentious divorce. It took a couple years to get done. It finalized a little over 5 years ago. Actually, around 5 years ago, almost the day of this recording, now that I'm looking at the calendar. I don't remember the exact day, but somewhere around now. And why do I bring that up? Well, the reason I bring it up is it's fresh enough to remember and long ago enough that I don't have to dwell on it every single day. Now, that being said, still a pretty contentious relationship with my kid's mom. Unfortunately, I would like that to change someday, but I'm at an impasse of not knowing where to go with that, which is interesting as a divorce coach, right? Because I think I'm starting with that for a couple reasons. Number one is that the most important thing is just being authentically yourself during this process. And it's such an overwhelming process, whether you're male or female, that there's just elements of you that shut down.
Yeah.
I remember hearing it when I went through my divorce. I heard this really strong analogy that helped me a lot. And what they said was every single person, think of like these different buckets of your being. You have emotional, spiritual, physical, mental, right? There's these kind of 4 buckets. And if you're living a normal life, about 25% of your energy is in each one, right? There's 4 buckets, 25% would be 100%, right? And what they were saying is when you're going through something really traumatic or something really difficult like a divorce, oftentimes what happens is that one bucket gets filled up to 70, 75, 80%. A lot of times that's the emotional bucket, as an example. Or it could be the mental bucket, or it could be the physical bucket, right? It could be one of them. But when that happens to one of them, there's only 20% for the rest of the buckets. So you just don't have capacity. What I think is a bit unique about men is that men are often told in this society, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, figure it out, work harder, just make sure that you get the 6-pack and that your business is growing. And as long as those two things are happening, then you're good. You're doing what you need to do as a man. So men entering divorce and then in divorce are feeling the same overwhelm as women feel, but they're not allowed to feel it. They're just not allowed. Because not only does society tell them they're not allowed to feel it, but their friends and family are like, just figure it out. What's your problem, right? You're a man. Buck up, kiddo, right? Things that my grandpa used to say to me all the time. Just make it work. So I think one of the unique challenges for men is that we're facing the same difficulty when we go through divorce, but we're not really allowed to be authentic about it. And if we are, then people turn us down a lot and they invalidate our experience. I see it a lot even online. Let's go back to online for a second. When I'll post a video of somebody talking or me talking about how men have a difficult experience with this, it's often received with hate, with a lot of people saying, oh, poor men, poor white man, poor privileged white man. It's, blah, 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 blah. Like somehow it's my fault that I'm going through a traumatic divorce because I'm a white middle-aged man. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't choose to be this. This wasn't like, maybe there's some privilege that exists. I'm not saying that there doesn't. I'm just saying That doesn't invalidate my experience. It doesn't invalidate my experience of how difficult this is.
And in fact, it's so interesting because for the brave man who's going to step up and speak up, there's a lot of judgment. And there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. And so it's like all of those hurt women out there who would see something like that, it is immediately going to be judged. It's one of the reasons I like doing co-ed groups, to help people see that both men and women are experiencing the same thing. And so to your point, that ability to show up authentic requires courage. Then you also have to have a thick skin, because what comes at you might make you want to go back in the cave.
For sure. And men have to have a thick skin anyway. And I'm not saying women don't. I'm just saying men have a unique place where we're just not allowed to have our emotions rule the day for anything. We just have to go keep doing what we need to keep doing. That is what we're constantly told. The difficulty with that, I think, with a lot of men, and honestly, the reason why it's even difficult for men to say, okay, I need some help, is because especially masculine men care a lot about power. That's one of the traits of masculinity. Now, there can be power that's yielded the wrong way, obviously, and then there's power that can be used for good. And men going through divorce a lot of the times feel like they lose power. They feel like they lose control, which is true. It's part of the process. And because of that, asking a man to be vulnerable in a state where he's already feeling vulnerable, like there's already a bear that's about to attack him, and you're asking him to sit there and let another bear attack him, it just doesn't resonate with the man. The man's like, no, I don't want to do that. I need my own personal power. And it's not an ego thing. It's just, I need to feel like I'm in control of something, that I can do something. And a lot of the times it's difficult for men to feel that way. And then women, a lot of the times, tell men, well, just be more vulnerable. I'm like, well, but if I'm more vulnerable, then I lose my power. So how do I get through this in an authentic way, but I also don't look weak among my bros and everybody else that I'm so concerned that is going to see me as weak, right? And that's a hard place for men to be. It was a hard place for me to be when I was going through my divorce. I get it, for sure.
How did you solve it?
I'll start with this. One of the reasons that I coach men going through divorce right now is because I didn't have a coach. Because when I went through my divorce, I had a lot of support around me. I had a really great therapist, great attorneys, great court, mediator, all those people. And I didn't have anybody that was like, hey, here's how you're going to get to the next level. Here's what you're going to do post-divorce. Here's version 2.0 of you. Here's how to do that. I didn't have that. And it took me years to figure it out. So I made a lot of bad choices. So to answer your question, at first, I didn't do a good job of it at all. I made a lot of bad choices. I decided to find new bottoms with addictions and other things. I tried all the things, right? Like I was in my mid 30s and decided to do all the things in my teenage years that I never did because I was kind of a goody two shoes kid. So the drugs and the alcohol and the sex and the women and all the things. That's what I did. And that was dangerous, more dangerous in my mid 30s than it would have been when I was 20 because I had more money and I had more time. So that, of course, left me empty, as it always does for anybody. And then one day I woke up and I was like, is this really what you're going to do with this experience?
Good question.
I remember I call them spiritual awakenings. And no matter how you view spirituality and religion, I think it's the same for everyone, where it's that moment where you realize, okay, something's got to change. And just everything in your body feels it. And you know that there's no option except to change immediately. And I remember specifically the one after my divorce where I felt that. And that was the beginning of really feeling like, look, instead of dwelling on this pain, instead of having this victim mindset, instead of saying, well, the whole world's against me, and like we've talked about before, all women are blank, just like people say all men are blank. Every time you say that, you just reinforce whatever stereotype is already in your mind. And I see guys do this all the time. And I was doing it at this point in my life. And I finally got to a point where I woke up and I was like, okay, instead of sitting in your pain, instead of being a victim to your pain, why not you use your pain for good? And why not you use your pain to go help guys that are in the same pain when you didn't have that help? Yeah. And that's why I do what I do. A long-winded answer to your question, but for me, it took a lot of time. Since then, I wrote a small book that helped men go through divorce. And I talk about different traps that you're facing, 5 traps actually that you face going through divorce. And those are the things that I realized when I was going through my divorce that I missed. And it's not that It's not that guys are dumb. They're not. They're smart. It's that the process is, and this is true for women as well, the process is so incredibly overwhelming that you really just need a guide to be like, look, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. Here's what your life looks like on the other side. And I thought my life was over after my marriage. And honestly, I have the best life I've ever had. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was because I'm the type of guy that only learns hard lessons, unfortunately. I don't learn easy lessons very well. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of guys are like that from my experience.
and I think that is the human experience, that there are plenty of men and women who go into divorce resistant, believing that they're divorcing the problem. They don't learn anything. And we talked about this. I was on the Derelict podcast, or recorded yesterday. And so we talked about how those who don't learn rinse and repeat, and they're the ones driving up the divorce rate for second and third marriages. And so I would love to, if you're open to it, dive into the 5 traps. I think that would be really interesting for both our men and women to hear about. Is that a book that's available for sale or as a gift for the listeners?
Yes, so both. So feel free to go on Amazon. I'll give you the link. You can add to the show notes later. And also, I'm happy to give it to your listeners for free if they'd like it.
So let's start. What are the 5 traps that...
Yeah, so good question. I'm also going to start with saying, even though I work with men, and even though these traps are geared towards men, they actually apply to women just as much as they do to men. There's nothing unique about these traps that are only for men. It's just the way that they present themselves. It's kind of like the conversation we were having earlier, where men are allowed to feel certain emotions. Women are allowed to feel certain emotions in general. And if a man feels emotions that he's not allowed to feel societally, then we're like, no. It's same with women, right? So like a man can have things like anger, but he can't have things like grief or being crying. That's not acceptable. Somehow this is and that isn't, which is odd. Versus a woman, she's allowed to grieve and do these things, but she's not allowed to like have this masculine anger or something about her. It's a weird thing.
I want to reframe that.
Sure.
And we're actually going to take a sponsor break before we dive into your 5. And so when you say allowed, I think that the conversation is that we are raised in a society where girls are expected and invited to be more emotional, more connecting, more soft. And men are often told that only sissies cry, and like you said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or if you're an adult, you don't need her anyway, let's get you laid. Like all of these things, which aren't the healthiest. And let's look at these 5 traps, talk about specifically the male perspective of it. And then at the end of each one, let's connect it to some females as well. And I think that would be great. So we're just going to stop for a quick sponsor break. And when we get back, we'll go into those 5 traps. Of course, your friends and loved ones care deeply about you. But if you're honest, while they mean well, when it comes to your divorce, they just don't get it. And sometimes you leave those conversations feeling even more isolated. If you're feeling lonely and craving connection, support, and practical guidance, check out our High Conflict Divorce Support Group, where we gather regularly from the comfort of our homes. Facilitated by Karen McMahon, you will feel heard, seen, encouraged, and powerfully guided in the emotional and practical steps ahead. Go to jbddivorcesupport.com/HCDSG and register today. Okay, Josh, let's start with trap number 1.
Sure. Yeah. So the very first one is it's almost a pre-divorce trap. And basically it's triggering too soon. So it's making a decision that is going to be a huge decision too quickly. So what I often see, if I have the honor of being able to work with somebody before they actually get divorced, is that they're allowing whatever emotions to just take hold of them and just have them get into the divorce. Just be like, yeah, I'm done, divorce, bye, right? It just happens very quickly. So the very first trap is just triggering too soon. What I've seen with a lot of people that go through divorce is that they're thinking about one element of the divorce and they're not thinking about all the other just consequences of what's going to happen. And this isn't a matter of, well, you should or shouldn't get divorced. It's a matter of, did you think about these different areas? So as an example, did you actually have these conversations with your spouse? And there's a bunch of questions and different ideas of what to talk about in that chapter. Did you consider what this is going to look like for the kids? And I don't just mean a brief consideration. I mean, like realistically, what do you think this is actually going to look like? What is that relationship going to look like with them, with your ex-spouse, etc.? Did you actually consider how your family and friends are involved in this? It's like a plan, right? I've been a financial planner for 20 years, and the biggest thing that I've seen with most people is that most people are smart and they have an idea, and then people that are smart with money and they save money and everything else, a lot of the times, all they need is just like, okay, I'm making all these different decisions, but I don't know how to coordinate all of it, and I don't know what this is going to look like. So it's really just creating kind of that vision, hopefully before. Now, if people are listening and they're already going through the divorce, they've already gone through divorce, believe it or not, this chapter actually can be really helpful still, because not only can this chapter help you with the next relationship that you have, but it also will just slow you down a little bit to think, okay, let me just think about the context and the vision here of what I'm going through. So that's the first step. The second one is, well, I'm not going to do these in any particular order. Once you see the book, you can see the order. The second one that comes to mind for me actually is not taking the relationship with your kids and being as present with them as possible. So it's incredibly difficult, as you know, I'm sure with the people that you work with, to be present when you're going through a divorce, because there's just so many things that are occurring that how do I just stay present with my kids? How am I even present with them with the time that we have? Let me back up for a second, because you asked me to also talk about the female perspective. So let me back up to the first trap for a second. This, I think, is a little different for females and males as well, this trap. Because males often are like, well, just get the divorce attorney, get it done. Generally speaking, more like kind of action oriented, like just task list, let's do this, etc. Right? And then just kind of move forward. So for a man, it's really important to slow down, look at the bigger picture. We can do the tasks, but let's make sure we're on the same page first. For a woman, like I said, in general, right? These are generalities. It's more about, okay, yes, let's look at the plan, but let's also figure out just mentally, emotionally, and spiritually where you're at, who you're listening to is a big one, right? What sort of input you're getting, how you're inputting that into the vision for your life, I think is something really important to listen to.
It's interesting. I wonder, I know that I do a whole thing for people who are on the mend or end fence. And I have a guy I'm working with right now who started 15 years ago. So there's no black and white in the conversation we're having. And I just want to say that to all of the listeners right now. These are very broad strokes. I find that often the majority of my clients spend years on that mender and fence. And I think with women, to your point, especially if you're the non-moneyed spouse, there's a lot of thought into, can I leave the kids? He doesn't take care of the kids. Can he take care of the kids? Do I have to start going to school? Do I have to start squirreling away money? Can I make this work? Can I try one more time? So like you said, it's very all-encompassing and it's a very slow move. And a lot of times this is happening and they're not having conversations with their spouse because they feel like I've tried. And so I know that with women and with some of my men, there's been a very long tail toward making the decision. I think what you're talking about, if I'm hearing you correctly, is a propensity to be reactive in that decision making and not think through all of the moving pieces and the complexities, because you get to a point as a guy for whatever reason and like, let's do this. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. You're hearing everything correctly. Number one is I am throwing out a lot of generalities because this is what I see generally speaking, but it's not true for every single person.
Right.
Just like a generality would be that most women are primarily feminine and have some masculine traits, and most men are primarily masculine and have some feminine traits. But then there's also women that are primarily masculine and men. It's the same thing. So all of these things are generalities, but this is just what I see.
So going into your second trap.
Yeah. So turning a blind eye to the kids, right? And that is just not being present in it. So what I see for guys, let me start with guys here for a second, especially going through divorce and immediately after divorce. This is the biggest trap that I see for men. And that is, here's how they're present with their kids, is often they become Disneyland dad, especially if, as is true with traditional divorce, most men get less time with their kids than women. It's just a fact if you look it up as far as timing goes, parenting time in the United States. Still, it's much closer to equal now than it was 50 years ago, for sure, but it's still
a little
favored
lopsided
towards women. Yeah, a little lopsided. And so a lot of guys, especially if they're getting 2, 3, 4, 5 days every 2 weeks with their kids, if that, feel a lot of pressure to make sure their kids are just having a blast, right? And they're just doing great. And that's great, but it's very easy to just let go of fatherly responsibilities and actually being a dad and just being this like friend or this cool dude or this divorced dad or this Disneyland dad or whatever. And it doesn't, I've noticed with guys, it doesn't matter if the kid is 2 or if the kid is 12 or if the kid's 22, they still do the same thing. It's just an easy way to be like, well, I can't handle all this stuff anyway. As a guy, I can't deal with all these difficult emotions anyway, especially if I have girls, right? I have 2 girls and a boy, so I get that. So I'm just going to make everything good and it's going to be awesome and it's going to be fun and we're going to do all this. Obviously, the biggest problem with that is that you're not really being intentional and present and authentic with your kids. And you can go too far as to not being authentic about the difficulty you're having. So plenty of people are way too informative to their kids.
Right.
And they get them in the process way too much. And then a lot of people are on the other side, especially guys that just never talk about anything.
Right. And it's actually so interesting that you say that because it's modeling. I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was 14. I know my mom was an incredible amount of pain and she never showed anything but anger. So I just didn't know she was a hurt human being. I didn't see her that way. And so you're kind of saying the same thing. If you're just like happy Disney dad, and you're not sharing that there's a range of emotions, we can go back to the beginning of our conversation, especially if you have sons, but even if you have daughters, like you don't want to be raising your children to think that, well, mom has all the emotions and I'm a robot. And the other part that you're saying about my words, not yours, it's so important that our dads remain leaders to the children in modeling both. You have to get your homework done, like all of those, like not so much fun parental responsibilities, as well as modeling healthy emotions. And so what I'm hearing you say is having the kids less, being so overwhelmed, you can just dive into that Disney dad and best intentions, trying to make sure they're having a good time with you and missing the broader range of roles that you're playing.
For sure. And you got to be diligent as well. The other thing for, again, let's say the traditional dad that is less involved with the kids, like at school and all these other things, which is still very much a thing. Go to any PTA meeting or go to any school event, you're still going to see primarily women there, even
100%.
though society's changed a lot. So that being said, the other thing that is difficult for a lot of guys, especially if they didn't spend a lot of time with their kids beforehand, is getting involved in that way. And when your kid's with you for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days every 2 weeks, you got to start learning how to do that, because otherwise, the other thing that's really easy to do is just throw them on the iPad and just be like, I can't handle it. I have all this other stuff going on. So no pressure, but those are the only people that you're going to have a relationship with, hopefully the rest of your life. And if you mess this up before they're 18, guess how often you're going to see them after they're 18. It's just not going to be a good connection. Yeah. So that, and going back to this, this difference, like if you have the Disneyland dad, you have the distraught mom or the reactive mom, right? So going back now to the female side is that you have a woman that, again, generalities here, but I've seen a lot of women that are a little bit too emotional, too involved with their kids, and they bring them too much into the process. And now all of a sudden they start replacing like what dad left behind. And now all of a sudden I'm connecting with them and maybe I'm getting enmeshed with them, or I'm just connecting with them on a level that's not super appropriate. So that's, I think, what a lot of women struggle with more than men, from what I see.
And I would say across the board, it's so easy to be so caught in your thoughts that
100%.
You're physically present with your children, but you're not emotionally present. You're not seeing them, you're not engaging with them. And this isn't a judgment. This is something that as your level of consciousness grows, you can catch yourself more and bring yourself back to presence. But especially right now, I've got a group of 18 women in a support group. And when I listen to the wide variety, and most of these women work full-time, if not part-time, and teenage kids who are hard no matter divorce and no divorce. And it's like, how do you remain present when you're in their presence? And how do you, to your point of the plan, whether you're spending a ton of time with them or not a lot, how do you make sure that is a priority. And I do think that crosses gender, regardless.
100% it does. Because I mean, I think one of the hardest things for whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter, gender-wise, is you're going from a place where you technically could be 24/7 with your kids to a place where you can't. Like, you're legally not allowed to. You could legally get in trouble if you try to be there 24/7 with your kids. God forbid you have a contentious relationship with their parent,
100%.
right? Giving up that that control that you thought you had, right? We have very little
You
control.
get access, and then all of a sudden
Giving up access. And then going back to the diligent conversation, this isn't just being diligent like when you're with your kids. This is not just making sure they're not watching inappropriate things on their iPads, which are important. This is also, where are they spending their time? Are there even safe spaces they're spending their time that are not safe spaces? Like, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of one parent just allowing the other parent to do whatever they want to do as far as medical, doctor, even therapists, counselors, etc., because they just are tuning out, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed with capacity.
Yeah.
And then one of those things actually turns into a negative. And you would think, well, what negative could come from therapy or coach or like a counselor? Or there's a lot of negative things, because kids get really confused during this time. And if there's manipulative parties involved, it can be a lot of trouble. I've had issues even in my own personal story with therapists and attorneys and other things that have tried to take the side of manipulative parties that have gone against my kids. And you just got to be diligent. And I think it's easy, especially for guys, where like we put our head down and we just go to work and we build our business and we do everything else. And we're just blind to this sometimes. Not because we don't care about our kids. It's just we didn't really feel like it was our responsibility when we were married. So now we got to adjust to, oh, this is my responsibility now. This is different.
I think that you just nailed something that I think is really key, which is the division of labor completely changes, and taking on both sides. And certainly for the dads, I always say to my men, do not go to your wife for what's happening at school. You call the school, you get on the mailing list, you develop the relationship. Like, she is no longer between you and your children and anything. She was for
100%.
good reason. That was her division of labor. You had yours. But going forward, and especially in high conflict situations, do not hand your agency over to that person.
Correct.
You take it, you take full responsibility. And I was a working mom. I would say to my kids, I can't be at everything. And so we talk truth to our children. I can't be, but you know what? You're in that school play and you're damn straight I'm going to be at that. But no, I can't be at the parade because mommy's out working. And so I think there are ways of doing that. We don't have time for all five. I'm going to ask you for one more. So pick the one that would resonate most with specifically men. And then we'll wrap up and talk about your podcast and your book again.
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to comment one thing on what you just said, because I really want to encourage everybody, you as well, for everybody. One thing I've learned about with my children is I try my best never to say I can't do something, because I can. I'm choosing not to. So if there's something with work or family or something else that's taking precedence, technically I could not do it. And I could go to their school play or whatever. Now, the consequence might be I get fired, or I lose a client, or I can't pay for groceries. I'm not saying the consequences aren't bad, but I'm saying I could do it. And one thing I found with my kids that's really helped me be super authentic with them about what's going on in my life. So if there's something going on and I'm going to be out of town for work, and that means that I'm missing their play, I try to explain that to them. I'm like, look, I could cancel my trip, but here's the reason I'm going on my trip. And here's the reason this is important to daddy's work, and all that sort of stuff. So just a thought for people.
Yeah, love that.
So yeah, real quick, I'm just going to tell you the other traps. I'm not going to go through them.
Okay.
And then if you guys want, again, reach out to me.
Perfect.
I'll give you the book. So the third one is trusting the wrong team. So basically, who's involved in the process of the divorce. Here's where we talk about attorneys, counselors, therapists, coaches, etc. Tossing self-care aside is a big one. Either really focusing on physical or not emotional or mental, emotional or spiritual, etc. We talked about that one a little bit. And then the fifth one, which is the one I'll actually talk about, is taking relationships post-divorce. So specifically, there's two I'm talking about here. Number one is the spouse and what that relationship looks like. So from what I've seen with men, and this is true, I think, for women as well, but you can either be too close to your ex-spouse, to conflict with your ex-spouse. Now, a lot of people think, how could you be too close? Here's how you can be too close. I've seen plenty of guys do this as well, especially guys that are like trying to be good and they're trying to connect well with the woman and they want to make sure that they're a team for their kids and everything else, which are all very noble goals. But sometimes that turns into mommy and daddy get along really well. Why are they not together? Maybe they'll get together one. Maybe they'll come back. And having that maybe, that hope for that child is extremely dangerous and bad for them. Even if you get back together, do not make sure it's very clear with your kids that you're done because they need to be able to move on with their life. And if you're constantly time with your spouse, like friends and connecting and everything else, it's going to be confusing to the kids unless you're very clear with them. Mommy and daddy are done. You can still be friends. It's just make sure that that's clear. And I think for men, a lot of the times it's the opposite of just putting their head down and just not paying attention to it at all. But the bigger piece of that trap, obviously, is the next romantic relationship or partnership that you get into. That's by far the biggest trap. So when I wrote this book, I went out to a couple dozen people that I had either coached, that were coaches, that were attorneys, therapists, etc. And I asked them all, what are the biggest things that you see, the mistakes you made going through your divorce? That's how I wrote the book. They came up with the same 5 that I already had, which was interesting. But the number one trap for all of them was everyone that was divorced said the exact same thing. They said, I started dating too soon. And it didn't matter if they were a day out of their relationship or 2 years out of the relationship. Every single person said the same thing. So how is that possible? 1 day versus 2 years? Well, it's very, very simple. The most important thing post-divorce, and you could be 10 years after your divorce and listening to this, and this might still apply to you, the most important thing is to take time to figure out who you are, to love yourself, to build the best relationship with yourself possible, and the best relationship with your higher power possible, whatever you call that, God, universe, whatever. Because those are the only 2 things that are going to validate you. Those are the only 2 things that are going to be true to you for the rest of your life. And the moment you jump into some other, you don't have that opportunity to learn that about yourself anymore. And it's only going to be harder the next time, which is why divorce rates go up with every single marriage, because most people don't do that. Then they get married again, and they get divorced again, then they get married again, they get divorced again without actually learning about themselves. Now, how does this show up as men versus women? Well, the old adage is true. Men usually don't do this with relationship. They usually do it with sex. How many women can I go have sex with? How many can I mark off the chart? Which is extremely unhealthy. So if you're anyone listening to this, be like, oh, what's wrong with that? There's plenty wrong with that. We can have a whole conversation about it. It's not going to help you. I promise. I've tried it. Not helpful. And again, generally, what I see with women is that this is more relationship. This is more like, let me go seek somebody else that's going to give me validation and support and safety and security and all those things I feel like I just lost. Where a man is like, no, I need my power, so I'm going to go catch some women, right? Like, I know it sounds very terrible, but it's just true. That's how men operate. And then women are like, oh my gosh, like, give me some security and safety and like help and support and that sort of thing. So it's the same result. It just looks a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that in general, we can say sex makes men feel loved. Women need to feel loved to have sex. And post-divorce, it doesn't matter which one you're going after. If you're not whole and complete, if you haven't healed and refined and fallen in love with yourself, who's the only person you're going to be with for the rest of your life, then you're distracting yourself. You're putting a Band-Aid on it, and the danger in that. And I always say this to my clients, if you want to go out and get laid, God bless. But if you know that after that great night, you're going to be like, oh my God, maybe he likes me, and you're not thinking about anything but him, you've already stepped onto a very dangerous, slippery slope. So be honest with yourself before you go to that place, both men and women. So I love that last one. I think.
Yeah, and I'm not a prude in any sense of the imagination. If you want to go have sex, go have sex. I don't care. But I'm just telling you that the validation you're seeking by doing that is not there.
Yeah.
It's not there in a relationship. And it's not there in sex. Don't listen to media. Don't listen to music or TV or movies or everything that tells you that that's where the validation is, because it's not. Anyone that's ever tried to get validation from those things knows it's not there. Yeah. So the only validation, loving relationship with myself, loving relationship with my higher power. And yeah, I'm the same way. I wish I would have taken more time to do that. Because like I told you, I decided to go experiment with things right afterwards. And it wasn't until that spiritual awakening where I was like, yeah, this isn't me. This isn't working. This is not helping me. I need to fall in love with myself, my higher power.
Beautiful. So folks, we talked about those early stages and not acting out of emotional reactivity, but having a plan, thinking things through. We talked about how vitally important it is to be present with your children and to continue to lead them and model for them both the difficult disciplinary things as well as emotionally healthy responses to things. And we talked about some of the traps that you can fall into. I really want to encourage you to grab Josh's book. And Josh has a great podcast called the Derelict Podcast, which he's going to talk about right now. What is your website? It's in the show notes, but share your website, share a little bit about your podcast.
Sure. It's thederelict.biz, which will maybe by the time of this airing, turn into thederelict.com. So it's one of those. Yeah, I'll share a little bit about the podcast. I'll also share about the new book that's just about to come out as of the time of this recording, which I'm really excited about. And it's called The Derelict: Fail, Fight, and Find Manhood. And it's a story about men becoming more masculine and authentic to themselves in a good way. This is all healthy stuff. And it has a lot of memoir type feel to it about different topics. So I hit the spectrum of things that guys go through, especially through divorce. So we talk about codependency and narcissism and gaslighting and sex addiction and love addiction and all these things with your kids. I'm really excited about the book. So that's really exciting. It'll be on Amazon soon here as well. But the whole theme behind all of it, as you can tell, the Derelict Podcast, Josh the Derelict, the Derelict book, the whole idea behind the theme is a derelict is something that's thrown aside, that's cast aside, that's abandoned, that's otherwise society looks at and they're like, yeah, I don't, that's torn, that's worn down, it's not worth it anymore. And I don't think I've ever felt anyone going through divorce that didn't feel like somehow part of my soul is getting ripped out of me and I don't even know who I am anymore. And I don't understand how to be authentic to myself. And that's the whole idea. So it's what we talk about on the podcast as well. We spend a lot of time helping, again, men going through divorce and then just helping men be more authentic. Again, most men don't want to be vulnerable because they lose their power, but they want to be authentic and they just don't know how because we haven't been taught. So I'm the first one. I expose myself in the book and my podcast every single week. And I'm like, look, here's the real me. Here's all the failures. Here's all the struggles. Here's what's going on. And here's how I've gotten through it and figured things out. And then it allows other people to do the same. So that's why I do what I do.
So check out the Derelict Podcast, grab that book on the 5 traps, and Josh will reach back out when his new book is hot off the presses. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing a little bit of your story and your wisdom with us. So appreciated.
Thank you, Karen. It was a pleasure being here.
And we'll be back again. You have a great day. Thanks for joining us on the Journey Beyond Divorce podcast. I hope you found guidance and encouragement to help you along your journey. If you like my podcast, please take a minute to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. You can also visit us at jbddivorcesupport.com, where our team of coaches support both men and women through our one-on-one coaching, group programs, online courses, and free resources. Stay tuned for our next episode, and I'll talk to you soon.